you would like to say anything. All right, we can go ahead to the next slide. So I do have a few items to go over before we start the presentation. Please know that this meeting is being recorded. That way it can be posted to the project webpage. It should be posted in about a week, and we'll add the link for the project webpage in the chat in case you'd like to view it again or share with neighbors who were unable to attend. And during the presentation, we ask that you keep your video off and microphone muted. During the discussion session, we encourage you to turn your video on if you feel comfortable doing so. Next slide, please. We hope everyone will feel comfortable sharing their questions and comments, either verbally or in the chat. You're also welcome to reach out to me directly via email if you would like to provide comments that way or discuss the project further. And we'll put my email in the chat as well. Next slide, thank you. And then in a moment, our design team will give a presentation followed by a listening and discussion session. If a question comes to mind during the presentation, feel free to add it to the chat and we'll address it after the presentation. If anyone is calling in on a phone, which I don't think anyone is, but use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute and to mute again. And if you're joining via Zoom, I think everyone's pretty familiar with Zoom by now, but use the raise hand button and we'll unmute you. My next slide, please. So thank you once again for joining us tonight. These are the topics we'll be covering this evening. First, the project team introduction, a project overview, which includes the schedule, a presentation by the design team, then a listening and discussion session, and then closing remarks and next steps. Next slide. So once again, I'm Amy Lene, project manager from Boston Parks. Shauna Dixon from Boston Parks is running the Zoom for us tonight. Elise Cabral from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services is joining us. And then we have the design team. So Sasaki is the firm, the landscape architecture firm on this project. They recently completed the Boston City Hall Plaza and have designed numerous parks and public projects around the country. So joining us from the design team, we have Zach Crisco, principal in charge, Garrett Craig Lucas, project manager, and Kira Sargent, landscape architect. And next slide, please. So looking at the project schedule, this is the first design meeting for the Ceylon Park Improvement Project. So as you can see on the schedule, the field renovation is on one timeline, which is scheduled to be completed this fall. And then the design of and construction of the rest of the park will happen over a longer period of time with an anticipated opening next summer. So the sports field is heavily used and we're planning to replace that turf and then it will be used as it has been. So we're particularly interested in getting feedback on the other areas of the park during this meeting and also through an online survey. So the link to the survey will be shared in the chat as well. It's also available through the project webpage. And then the second design meeting will be scheduled for late May. And at that time, we'll share some preliminary design concepts for the park. And next slide. So a little bit about the project approach. There's several components that go into public park design, one being community input, which we're gathering tonight and through the survey. In addition, safety guidelines and regulatory guidelines such as ADA, City of Boston priorities and the parks and recreation goals, which we'll cover in the next two slides. The next slide. So the City of Boston priorities include expanding walkable access to parks, addressing equity, climate resilience, dealing with stormwater and extreme heat, for example, health and housing and community building. Next slide, please. And the parks and recreation goals include creating spaces that are accessible and available to all, that have a diverse, balanced, and efficient mix of uses, that include meaningful and inclusive community engagement, that incorporate adaptive and resilient landscapes, and promote connections. So with that, I will turn it over to Garrett from Sasaki to give the presentation.
Hi all, thank you, Amy. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. I'm really excited to be working on this parks project, Ceylon Park, as is our team at Sasaki. We're excited to be working on Ceylon Park, which has a long history in the neighborhood, which I'll get into a little bit now to introduce the site. So first off, Ceylon Park is in a dense neighborhood here. You can see in pink, many schools in the immediate surroundings of the site, as well as surrounding green spaces, which we've been looking into, both surrounding parks as well as gardens and community spaces. So this actually brings us into one of our first questions. What is your relationship to the neighborhood in Ceylon Park? Are you a local resident, student, staff, or parent at the local school, an employee at a local business owner? Do you visit the park for sporting events or for other reasons? Feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat if you'd like to answer the question. And we also have the survey link available. So these questions you'll be able to, and we encourage you to take the survey after the call as well. We'll also have a more open discussion at the end of the presentation, as was noted previously. See some answers coming in the chat. Thank you for your responses. I'll move on to the next question here, but please feel free to keep on typing your answers to question one. And what is special about Ceylon Park to you? How is it special compared to other parks in the neighborhood? Again, feel free to type in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and we can have a discussion about these questions at the end as well. So I'll move on here to talking a little bit more about the history, but feel free to keep responding to the questions. Ceylon Park is an historic park. It was acquired by the city of Boston in 1923. So we're really excited that this is the 100th year since the opening, or the acquisition of the park by the city of Boston. And I'm sure you've experienced, the historic character of this park is really special. From the rolling lawns to the abundance of mature trees, there's a really beautiful quality that exists. It's an evolving park. Prior to the development even of all of the roads and buildings in the area, as you can see in the 1870s map on the left, there was this beautiful topography that we see in these rolling lawns and the grade change across the entire site. By the late 1800s, there was a road network starting to show up, but not all of the roads were framing the site yet, and not all of the buildings were even in place that framed the site. By 1933, all of the final road configuration and buildings were in place, and then that 1933 map is showing the site 10 years after the park was opened by the city of Boston. In the mid 1900s, there were more developments to the park, some changes in program, including the introduction of the sports field that in the location that we now see today. And this next slide shows a little bit about the detailed history of all of the transformations of program from the mid-1900s to the 2000s, starting in the 60s with the introduction of the basketball court and actually a pool area and play area, as well as a baseball field where the turf field is today. In the 1990s, there was some regrading of the overall hill to allow for sledding on the west side of the site, and the lower play area and upper lawn were formalized. In the 1990s, there was another renovation of the playground, and in 2008, there was a renovation of the turf field. The amphitheater was introduced near the Columbia Road entrance, and a splash pad was introduced in that location as well. A little bit more information on the 2008 renovations. In 2008, there was the significant renovation of the sports field, the introduction of that amphitheater on the lower left-hand side of this diagram. You could see on the right side, bottom right-hand side of the page, that amphitheater in a rendering, and the introduction of that lower play area on the top image. The upper play area was also redeveloped at that time. And why renovate today? We're looking to update this much-loved community park to the standards of today, which means improving access, upgrading the field, working on landscape management of some overgrown plants on the slope, and also celebrating some of the historic materials on the site, repairing materials that are not in great condition, and updating paving that is also in need of some repair. So we're interested to hear other reasons and other things that you would like to see in this renovation. There's a need to refresh play, and we're curious what else you might have on your mind about what should be included in this renovation. So on that note, we'd like to ask the question, what areas should be prioritized for renovation? Should the playground at Magnolia Street on what was shown at the top of the plan image be renovated? What would you like to see there? Is the basketball court in most need of renovation? The sports field, the Columbia Road entrance, accessibility, lighting, seating. So if you could let us know what you think of these items would be the most important item in your opinion. Feel free to use the chat or raise your hand. And these questions are also included in the survey online. Another question that we'd like to ask is, what is your biggest concern about Ceylon Park? So we can, if you feel more comfortable speaking up now or typing in the chat these, your response to this question, please do so. We can also have an open discussion at the end of the chat. So we can take a moment here. I see there's an answer coming into the chat, so I'll just leave it on the last slide. And before we move on to the next section of the presentation, we can talk about what we would like to see improved most and what are the biggest concerns. Great, I'm seeing a number of notes on lighting, seating, safety, and these are all certainly things that we've been looking into as we're in this early stage of trying to understand the site and the needs as part of the renovation. Great, thank you. I think we can move to the next section, but please feel free to keep on adding notes in the chat, and we're taking note of these as well. I'll pass it over to Kira.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kira Sargent. I'm a landscape architect at Suzaki, and I'm very excited to be working on Ceylon Park with the team here. So the next section focuses on programming, and we're just going to take a look at, how is Ceylon Park used in the community today? With the goal of understanding, are there ways that we can change it during this renovation to make it work better for everyone in the community? So we know that it's used for a wide variety of events, from celebrations with lots of people and cooking of different kinds to large sports events and informal gatherings, as well as just a regular neighborhood park where people go to get outside. Next. So currently over half of Ceylon Park has active programming designed into it, including both an upper playground and a lower playground, fields and courts. And just to give you a little perspective, there's over 1,500 students within just a 5-minute walk of the park. So it's used heavily, but maybe it could be used even more heavily in the future. The active programming play elements include the basketball courts on the upper level, soccer on the lower level, the water play, and some climbing steps, which are also different play elements. These are really focused on fun and sort of free physical exercise. In the upper playground, there's equipment for sliding and climbing, swinging and stepping. These are, again, also mostly focused on physical play. And the Parks Department typically replaces play equipment when parks are renovated. So this is a really good chance to introduce new play elements and potentially increase different types of play. The next slide is for the turf field renovation. And Trey, would you like to speak to this one?
Sure. Yeah. So, as Amy said, we're planning on renovating the field this summer into the fall, and ready for fall. And so the goal is to replace the field, new turf, the infill, and actually put a pad underneath the field to help with safety of the field. Planning on restriping for soccer and lacrosse, and putting new goals in for soccer. So that's kind of the extent of the first phase of this project here, is just kind of getting a new turf. The field is 15 years old, so it's kind of it's reached its extent of its life. So and it will be a question there. It's replacement of in kind. So it's a synthetic turf field now. So it'll be a synthetic turf field going forward. And just as Garrett said earlier, if there's anything that comes up or any comments, we're working on those documents now. That'll be that first phase of the project. So we're working on those documents now. So if there's any other comments associated with the field that, please put them in the chat or send them in along in the survey so we can include or at least chat about them.
There's a raised hand. Do we want to take that now or?
Yeah. I think we can.
I think Mike's question from the chat was about the synthetic turf topic, and the comment on the mayor saying they weren't going to have synthetic turf. So there's been a little back and forth on that, but the current approach is that synthetic turf will get replaced in kind, like Trey said. There's advancement, I guess, in the, and maybe if Trey wants to speak to this, but I'll just say from the city's perspective, it's an improved product than what we had, say, 15 years ago. There's also just such limitations on a natural turf field that it would mean using this far less frequently, and we have such a demand for sports fields that it really would restrict that use detrimentally. So that's sort of part of the reasoning for this synthetic replacement. Let's see, Mike, did that answer your question? Or oh, you can't unmute. Okay, let me see. We can I mean, we're generally trying to hold the questions for the end, but since we're on this topic,
I understand the thing about turf issues, but I thought there's some environmental and health and safety issues. That's why that the mayor proposed not having any sort of turf issues. So I wonder why that's being bypassed and not really around for full discussions. I mean, we would like to have some environmental justice groups weigh in on that as well, because they were very strongly about it.
I know that question's for me, Amy, and I don't know how I don't know how to. I'm just flat out. I don't know how to answer that one in terms of basically the parks has basically said on this project you could replace the field, and then going forward on other stuff, I think it would be almost a per project. So we could follow up with further answer, Amy, to specifically on this question.
yeah, we could do that. I mean, I think the other once the discussion, I think, happened in more detail around the pros and cons with the synthetic versus natural, I think it was evident that the downsides of natural turf were actually quite extensive, including irrigation requirements, the materials that go into that. While certainly there's materials that go into the synthetic turf, there's really just sort of trade-offs, but the trade-offs of the natural turf were just worse, I guess, really for the use of the park. So that's sort of where that back and forth happened, and what I think landed on proceeding with synthetic turf, just for really the usability, because before this 28 renovation, when it was a natural turf field, it really became just essentially a dirt patch and unusable. So that's something we wouldn't want to see, knowing that there's a lot of demand for sports play areas. And we can certainly, Mike, talk to you more about it and follow up with more information if that's helpful.
He's on mute, technically.
Why don't we keep moving? We can come back to this as a discussion at the end.
So in addition to all of the active play areas and the field, the park has a lot of other different kinds of amenities for convenience and comfort. There are several different types of seating. There's park benches, bleachers, amphitheater seat walls, and even picnic tables up at the upper playground. There are 2 water fountains, a portable restroom, and trash cans. So we definitely want to hear, as part of the feedback, which of these amenities we need more of, or you would like to see in different locations. So the next slide is, we can skip this. I think we said, Garrett. What do you typically do at Ceylon Park? And this is, again, a question from our survey. Feel free to type in the answer into chat. Some of you have already mentioned the different things you like to do. We have a couple people on the Zoom who are working with sports. And then I know someone said they're just a local resident. Sports at the turf field. And another question we have is, do you have a specific place that's your favorite place in the park, or a specific event that is really special and unique? So you can type those in the chat, and I'll keep going. The third section of our presentation is analysis of the different systems in the park and how they're performing, starting with natural features and then circulation and lighting. So first, natural features. In terms of the vegetation, Ceylon has some major assets, including over 41 mature trees. They're a beautiful feature and very practical in terms of casting great shade during the summer, which is really important in a dense urban neighborhood that can become overheated. In other places, though, the vegetation has also become overgrown or overcrowded by invasive species, such as on the steep slope and at some of the entry plantings. Next. So the mature trees are spread across the site, which is a great benefit to any redesign of the park. And there are also a lot of decorative trees down by the field, and the plantings are focused at the entrance. So kind of trying to highlight those areas. This renovation will need to balance preserving and celebrating the vegetation on site while also creating a landscape that is easier to maintain in the long run. Another asset at Ceylon is the topography. So even though having a really dramatic topography makes it more challenging, and we do want to work on the circulation and accessibility of the park, topography is an asset because it creates these really amazing views and a different perspective that, again, in a crowded neighborhood, you just can't get if everything is flat and there's buildings all around you. So we hope to help manage the vegetation in a way that enhances the views of the surrounding neighborhood and of the parks within the park itself. Zach is going to talk a little bit about the entrances and different circulation systems within the park.
Hi, everyone. So as Garrett mentioned earlier, the park has a really unique situation in terms of location to amenities, neighborhood features, schools, and then other major nodes of interest. So less than a mile from both Upham's Corner and Franklin Park, good access to both the T service and commuter rail. And then each of the major roads that abut the park have an entrance into the park, and sometimes multiple. And so there's good access to the park itself. As we think about that access, though, once you're in the park, on the next slide, you can see that while there's thousands of feet of accessible pathways, there are also some key pathways right now that are inaccessible. And so as it stands today, getting from Magnolia Street down to the lower elevations of the park isn't feasible without navigating through one of these inaccessible pathways. And so one of our major goals, and as Amy mentioned earlier, the goals of the parks is to try to improve accessibility throughout the park, and thinking about how people enter the park, where they're trying to go, and getting there in a manner that's safe. So one of our questions to you all is, how do you get to Ceylon Park? Are you coming by foot or bike, or by car, bus, or train? We'd be curious to know that, because it'll help inform us. Are you walking your students there? Are you taking bikes and we need more bike racks? It'll help inform that design. Feel free to drop those in the chat as we continue on here. And then the next piece of our question for you all is, Which of these entrances, they're labeled A through E, I'm sorry, A through F, do you use? Which one's the most common that you enter in? And again, from our perspective, knowing how people are getting to the park is really important as we think about how to take the budget that's been assigned for the project and make the most efficient and best use of those dollars. And so thinking about accessibility, about the arrival sequence, safety, which was mentioned a number of times in the chat. This would be helpful for us to know how people are getting into the park. So feel free to type into the chat A through F. And it looks like there's one more entry that we perhaps missed there. So thanks, Robbie. All right, and then a couple more slides, and then we're going to open this up for discussion. One really amazing piece of the site, as Kira and Garrett mentioned earlier, is just the view sheds that are available today because of the great topography, the significant trees that exist on site. We've identified a few that we found in those pink dots to be quite stunning, but as noted in the chat and by others, the overgrown topography of the slope has also limited some of those. And so thinking about where we can open up those views that improve both your experience, but also safety will be important. And so we've identified a few of those in this slide. And then finally, lighting came up a bunch in the chat so far. We've identified where that lighting exists today. So it's largely consolidated around the sports field, the lower sports field, the basketball court, and then otherwise lighting within the park relies on the existing street lighting that surrounds the perimeter of the park. So that sort of concludes our analysis and findings to date. We're still very much in the exploration part of this project. And so our goal for the rest of the meeting today is to hear from you all where you'd like to prioritize improvements, what you see as the most significant upside, and hearing any other types of feedback that you all have for us that will inform our design process moving forward. So we have a series of questions on the next slide that are really just prompts, and we certainly would love to hear responses to these questions, but we think a general discussion would be great. And so feel free to either type into the chat or raise your hands and we can begin that discussion now. Anyone bold enough to start?
Let's see, it looks like we have a question about the timeline for the project. And so that that schedule has the turf replacement happening this summer. Yeah, we could go back to that schedule. Great. And then the remainder of the park will proceed with 2 more meetings after this through June, and then into design, and then we anticipate it opening in the summer of 2024. Yeah, no worries. The deadline for the surveys, that's a great question. I think we probably can leave it open for 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe we'll need to nail that down, but knowing that we're trying to have the second community meeting in late May, I think if we could get, let's see, 3 weeks would be May 3rd. So I think that's probably a reasonable time frame for the survey. Let's see, Joao, I'm going to try to unmute you.
Can you guys hear me?
Elise, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. How are you guys? I put my information in the beginning of the chat. My name is Alize. I work in the mayor's office of neighborhood services. And, I put my email in there. It's first name Alize Cabral. You know how the Boston emails work. Feel free to reach out to me if there's any engagement I can help with this, because obviously you guys have this survey and not everybody's going to attend these meetings. Of course, some providers and community members like Paolo and Brown here are, they can engage with the students. But if there's any way that I can kind of help get this survey out, just to get more answers. And just my question really is, do you guys have things in place where you're already in the schools asking these things for the students that are using the space and families that live in the area?
Thanks for that, Alize. Sorry, I said your name wrong earlier. So we have connected with the local schools. I think we will certainly send them links to the survey, but if there's anything, more that you suggest, we could certainly take flyers to have students receive if that's helpful, or other things that, might get the word out. We're always, open to more feedback on that.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm going to be speaking as a resident. And I seen like some changes are going to be done at Ceylon Park. I see about the turf and also the grass. And then I have some points, especially if we going back to the grass. I believe the park is not being taken care now. That's turf, and imagine if it becomes grass. And also the safety concern. So I live, Boss falls through my yard, to tell you the truth, how I live. So I'm even afraid to use that park because of some of the safety issues, especially nighttime, if there is a cutoff time for the use of the park, and then how those porta potty, those bathrooms are being used or being not being worked on. And then I see people peeing inside my fence sometimes, or people taking dump that you can see clearly through my windows. That I believe if there's some changes being done, that porta potty needs to be relocated some other place. Because one, is not being cleaned, is not being looked at. And I see in the mornings when parks come in to do cleanings, how they clean those areas. They just pick up the stuff that they see, they take off. The other thing is, like I said, with permits, who's getting permits for those parks? I see people coming from I don't even know where, getting permits, and then people, local residents, struggling to get permits or lights over there. And then also with benches, like I know we're doing all these vegetation and stuff, but we're not looking for safety. I've seen games that where ref decide to pause or leave the games because they're not safe. The way like the people in the stand are staying by the line because there is no place for people to sit. So that's if we're doing something, a renovation, I believe the first thing is where people like spectators will stay or stand or sit, because some sit on the wall, some stay by the lines, and some of the linesmen, like the ref, they don't have a place to stand. To tell you the truth, like I said, I have a 2-year-old brag sometimes to go to park, but how those people like at night, midnight, stay in the car, loud music, or doing inappropriate stuff. I'm not taking my son at 12 a.m., but like I said, when I see those things, it kind of like pushed me not to take him out there so they won't see those things. But probably some other folks in this thing have different say. But like I said, safety is the #1 concern there. And then there's a lot of other issues, drug dealing over there, park. Sometimes I stay in my car until like after hours, waiting for parking. Because like I said, stuff is happening at the field, and then I live right there. So there's no parking space for me. I have to wait until people leave their games for me to park. So if we do think about renovation in our park, we have to think about parking. If we're gonna make it residential parking, or how we thinking about parking. And also, if we can add cameras there, it'll be good because it will alleviate some of the safety issues that I'm talking about. Because like I said, it's cars, drug dealers staying there from 9 a.m. to past midnight. And then it's not being resolved. And then I've been to BPD, B2 a few times. Last time I went, it was like police officer knocking my door, come show me what's going on. I'm not gonna put myself at risk. Because if I'm going there to your office, gonna make a complaint, and then you coming in and knocking on my door for me to go show you what's going on, that means you're not doing your freaking job, excuse my language. So that's my point. I know some people might have some different things to say, but the porta potty and then the benches on the stand for people to watch the games or watch the activity, that's what people needs to watch for if we make a renovation to the park. Thank you.
Thank you, Joelle. Those are great comments, and we'll certainly be noting those. And I understand the concerns about safety and people using the park for sort of negative purposes. We're certainly trying to think about that. It's some ways outside of sort of what we're able to control, but I think we'll be thinking about that as we make design changes. I think another recommendation or opportunity is to, if there are specific maintenance issues, you can certainly report them to 311. I think it's one of those things where if there are a lot of reports coming in for this particular park through 311, it gets some attention. So sometimes it's good to sort of be the squeaky wheel in that regard, just so that it becomes it sort of draws attention to the need there. But I know that maybe doesn't always feel like a kind of an immediate solution, but certainly something I would recommend. Okay, if anyone, I'll start looking through the chat questions unless anyone else does want to speak up. Let's see, Robbie, thanks for pointing out that connection to the school. That's helpful to know. And Mike, your comment on the neighborhood residents association. Let's see. So I will email, I'll take the list from this meeting and I can email everybody the links that we've shared, the project webpage, the survey, and then any information that we have thinking about the next meeting, we can start to pass that along. Let's see, I think we have raised hands now.
Amy, I just wanted to jump in and mention that I just also added the survey QR code to the chat.
Oh, great. Okay. And okay, Paulo, are you able to, you're unmuted now, right?
Yes. Paulo de Barros, Cable Association of Boston. I'm glad that we're here today, finally after a lot of advocacy for many years waiting for the park to be renovated, because it's a gem for the community. It's an oasis. A lot of kids play soccer there. They have a lot of history there, and basketball at the top. Schools use them. Residents of the community use them. I echo João's point in terms of safety. Since he bought a house there, he's seen a lot of stuff. But my comments, I was part of the the first planning to redo the park and renovate the park. I know we're doing surveys and trying to talk to the community. We did that. We dreamed about a lot of things in the park. One thing that I would suggest, if at the end when you guys when you ask the community for their inspirations and dreams, and if there's a decision to be made to cut things, come back to the community. Because the last time, the reason why we have those things overgrowing was supposed to get bleachers in there. And at the end of because of the construction ran out of money. I don't know what happened because they changed so many people in charge of it as a project manager. There was some issues and end up leaving that place to become like it is because of the overgrown. I played soccer there when it was turf as a youth. I played soccer as an adult. I coach both Burke girls and boys soccer team there. I have a soccer team that plays there. So I know the park well, and I know what it does for the community, especially the Cape Verdean community and other immigrants community. It's important to pay attention that when we do the survey, that we're inclusive, that everybody's at the table, especially the residents, because there's a lot of unsafe things that goes on in that park. That's all I gotta say.
Thanks, Paulo. Yeah, that's a great point. I think, our goal would certainly be to, if it gets to that point where, we're forced to cut something out, to have that transparency with the community. We're trying to be somewhat realistic, I guess, about what the budget will get us. I mean, it is a construction budget is 3.3 million. So it's, it's not insignificant, but of course, with the field replacement, the playgrounds, the basketball court, it can go quickly for those improvements. So we'll certainly aim to communicate that, to the community as needed. Let's see, Joao Barros, are you unmuted now?
Yes, I am. So my name is João Barros, and I'm the head boys soccer coach for the Burke Dearborn soccer team. And I definitely wanted to be part of the meeting just because that is our home field, and we have about 60 students that we serve at that field. I think the plan is to increase the numbers to about 80 students from our middle school to the high school. And I was very concerned about first the conditions of the field. That field has for many, many years needed to be renovated. There were a lot of safety issues. The goals are very, very ancient, where we would have to legit tie down the nets by using rocks, because it's such an old system, and that can lead to a lot of serious injuries if a kid were to hit his or her head on there. So that's one of the concerns that I have. The turf is totally exhausted to a point where there was a huge metal piece that was exposed that could have led to many injuries. Luckily, it never led to any injuries. But I'm glad that there's finally something happening to better that field. I think it's very disrespectful to our fans, whether it's parents or students, that when they go to watch games, and between the girls team and the boys team, we have about 25 games a season. They go to watch games, they have to sit on a rock wall or stand by the sidelines. I think it's also a safety issue for our students when they're at practice and there are grown men, especially the female students, who are harassing them on the sideline because it's not fenced in. Not to mention that, and again, some of this is on the community, and it's because it's not a fenced in facility. There are folks that are riding, bikes, scooters, and, all sorts of different, means of transportation on that field. So it'd be good for this future field if it were to be renovated. If it were to be fenced in. And again, if we had proper facilities, because we host so many schools from other school districts in the state of Massachusetts, and there's no place for us to change. So whether it's a very small space for both girls and boys to be able to change and use the restrooms, even if it were to be a metal door type of system with a deadbolt, that'd be great. But again, seating is also a priority for that field, because again, our fans, they deserve to be able to sit down, or folks from the community in general. If there's any game, whether it's a high school soccer game, an adult league of some sort, or for the younger kids, because there are a lot of club teams who want to use that facility with our youngest group of kids, anywhere from like 4 to 7 years old to start with. Those parents, those community members should be able to have proper seating to view a game instead of having to sit on a rock wall. That's all that I wanted to say.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for those comments.
You're welcome.
Okay, looks like Mike, you had another comment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of we had invited folks to present at 2 neighborhood associations that are on the upper side that really do utilize the upper side of the court of the playground in particular, and walk, who are it's very accessible and so forth. We tried to we do an instructional basketball league program on the basketball court. I think the court is in okay shape. It was recently done. There's stuff that needs to be done, like better benches and trash can facilities and other stuff. And I think, and my staff is getting back to me on that. We did try to rent out a porta potty and put it in the green space next to the playground area. When we tried to lock it, people kept on breaking the lock to the point where it wasn't working. So I agree on the lower end. There has to be figuring out how to deal with it, but on the upper end as well, because we were trying to do a 7 to 10-year-old session, and we needed to have a porta potty, and they're not going to pick up and drop off. So it is something that we have to, I would like to understand how we can make it more secure. The Kaboom playground, which we did many years ago, needs to be redone. It's got wood chips, it's clearly outdated, and a lot of stuff needs to be done. And then we're looking at really utilizing the play area, the grassy play area for yoga and other wellness activities on the upper end as well. So I think there's a variety of different stuff, but again, there's a lot of neighbors that would like to weigh in that come to the meetings. Also, some folks aren't going to don't have the capacity to log in like this. I mean, they more do calls or whatever. So there has to be some other ways, and we will certainly we'll work with Dorchester Bay, because Dorchester Bay has property right next to it as well, and we'll work on getting the surveys out and making sure that residents have feedback into it.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. We really appreciate your partnership on this. Nathan, I see your hand. I'm just gonna, Councilor Worrell has joined us, so I just want to give him a chance to say
Yes,
something.
good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for all the community members that are here today joining us, and thank you to the Parks team for hosting this meeting. I live not too far from Ceylon Park, and I remember I took my nephew down there because I used to play soccer as a child and as a teenager. And when I went to the field was kind of, well, not kind of, it was already down to like this black substance. And, you know, when I got into city council my first year, one of the pushes that I heard from community and that I saw for myself, you know, like members like of the community, like Paulo de Barros, Mike Kozu, that, you know, they were pushing for was the redevelopment and redesign of this park. So I'm just so happy to see that it's now moving forward and to actually getting redesigned. So I'm excited about that, having a soccer field for one of my favorite sports to play in the neighborhood is awesome. But also want to make sure that when we're doing this engagement and getting ideas of the redesign, is also, I know the Parks Department has a list of who uses the field. So if we can get information out to them or if a survey out to them to kind of hear from them what they would like the field to look like, because you know they have events all throughout the summer, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You know that field could be, you know, filled with soccer league. So just want to make sure that we're also centering those who use the field the most and are activating those spaces, and that we're making it comfortable and enjoyable for them as well. So, and I know a lot of those individuals are Cape Verdean. So working with the Cape Verdean Association of Boston to make sure that the engagement is language accessible for these meetings and for communication as well. So thank you again to everyone lending their voice to this conversation, and thank you to the Parks team, and thank you to the administration for also pushing this forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Counselor. All right, Nathan Stern.
Hey everyone, so my name is Nathan Stern. I'm part of the Health and Wellness Department at Dearborn STEM Academy. Our boys and girls use the soccer field, both middle school and high school, for their home games. In addition to that, I also run a youth soccer club here based in Dorchester, and for years we haven't even considered using the field because it's just simply not been a safe space for children. We have kids as young as 4 years old. As Mike Kozu touched upon, there's no place for 4-year-olds to go to the bathroom, and so you know it just hasn't been a place that we've used, and we've had to seek places elsewhere that aren't necessarily in the community where a lot of the kids are coming from, and so that's, you know, been a hard part. My biggest concern is once the field's been redone is the upkeep of the field, because it was redone and it was beautiful at one point, and it was just left to deteriorate over many years. We used to run a summer camp there. We would show up on Monday morning for our camp, and we would have to spend the first hour cleaning up the trash. And I just want to make sure that, you know, things like that, you know, and as well as the ongoing safety issues are adequately addressed, because we need this to be a safe place for our young people. Both school children. I know Roxbury Prep uses it, Frederick Pilot uses it. We obviously use it for our school, as well as other youth groups. You know, I know Boston Scores uses it. They're busing kids from all over the city to use this field, and we just simply need it to be a safe space for kids. So I don't want to be too redundant. A lot of good stuff has already been said. So thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to see what the final product looks like. It's exciting that this is finally happening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. Okay. Okay, I see we have some comments in the chat about cameras. We can certainly, security cameras, we can certainly look at that. A question about the field being accessible when the other construction is happening. So that would be the goal, that while the field is being replaced. The rest of the park is open. And then as the rest of the park is under construction, the field would still be open for use. Survey in different languages. Yeah, we can absolutely translate that for people. I think maybe we look into just going ahead and sending a link in different languages. I think that's something we can do for sure. In Spanish. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes. The comment that did come through in Spanish from Adela Esparza. She's a volunteer community leader and resident of Maloney. And some time ago, they go to the park and spent a pleasant time with the people who make up the senior program. They enjoyed that nature and peacefulness in the park. So the issues of security came up, potential gun violence. So again, some safety comments there. So thank you, Adela. Can I answer her back in Spanish? I personally cannot. So we, one thing I guess I do want to point out, so the city does offer interpretation services if they are requested prior to the meeting. But I can certainly send her an email, a translated email to follow up with her. And let's see, Angie, the next question about the next community meeting. So we're looking at a late May, but before Memorial Day. So we'll certainly nail that down, I think probably in the next week or two, so we can let you all know when that's scheduled. We're considering maybe an opportunity to have something on site in the park, just to get potentially people who aren't using Zoom regularly. So, we'll certainly follow up on that. Let's see, when will the field be completed? So the target is this summer. I know that the school schedule does start in mid-August for that season. So we are, we're trying to figure that out. There could be potentially some impacts to the schedule, but trying to minimize that. August 21st, yeah. Kimberly, in response to your question, yeah, so something in the park where people could actually come and, at least talk about sort of what the existing conditions are, but also potentially look at some renderings or, drawings that talk about some concept design. Let's see. Yeah, Joao dos Santos can unmute you if you want to. Did you want to say your question?
Yes, sorry, I'm not gonna use camera, I'm driving. So I have one more question is, since the park is being renovated, what's the other alternate, especially for sports that's gonna happen during the summer? Would it be any other accommodation for any other parks for folks to use? Yeah.
Yeah, I think oops. I think we would have to look at the permitting schedule and what is available at other parks. It's a sort of downside to renovations is that it does tend to push, one activity, kind of displace one activity briefly, but the payoff being that it will be a nicer field in the end. So we can certainly try to see what's available elsewhere and make a recommendation for reprogramming or sort of relocating some of those activities. And I'll talk with, I'm sure for those of you that have permitted activities, Paul McCaffrey in our office, so we can do our best to figure out another location for games. Okay. Does anyone have any other final questions that they want to either enter in the chat or convene at the park and invite everyone? Yeah, I think that's something we're going to look into, is having an event at the park. I know there's some people that have an easier time, with Zoom, because they may have commitments at home that sort of allows them to multitask. And I think there's some people that probably have a easier time coming to an in-person meeting. So, we'd like to be able to accommodate those different groups as much as possible. Let's see, Jackie, I see you have a question.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, great. I don't really have a question. I just, my family's been in this community for a really long time. And so we live at the corner of Greenhays and Magnolia, which is a entrance to one of the main entrances to the park up by the charter school here. And I know that, I remember growing up, it used to be sort of more of a multi-purpose kind of a field. We had, two like softball, baseball. We had a pool down there when I was a kid, and a clubhouse. And it was really much more inviting, I think, for many other activities. And back in the day when we used to have the summer thing concerts, I'm really dating myself. So I'm just, I don't really have a question. I'm just hopeful that with this project that many elements of the community can be sort of included, and that this can become more of a sort of a multi-purpose and more inviting space for many different ways, more than just, a field and a basketball court. So I look forward to what's coming in the near future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. So yeah, another question on the follow-up meeting. So, we're looking at late May, but we'll nail that down and certainly let you all know. And then the impact on parking during construction. Maybe Garrett, do you want to answer that question, just because I know you have kind of a sense of how those logistics are going to work?
Sure. We're still working on documentation for the sports field, but there may be some impact to parking on Ceylon Street due to need for some space for construction logistics and lay down, but that's still to be determined. It seems that the impact should be minimal, but it's still in progress, and we'll have more of an understanding as we move towards the next community meetings, I imagine. Anything else to add, Trey or Amy or Zach?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, yeah, it still hasn't been figured out, but there will be, I mean, I know along Ceylon, just when material for the field, it's specifically for the field itself for that project, when the material leaves the site, they'll have to be loading. So there'll be some parking spaces along that edge that'll have to be kind of reserved for that time to be able to load trucks up so we're not blocking the street. And then when material comes back in, so there'll be specific times, and when we will understand those times when we specifically get a contractor on board and be able to put a logistics plan together and share it with folks for both that demo time and then also the installation time.
Great, thanks, Trey. Let's see, so thank you, Paolo, to help with translation and outreach. And Mike, yeah, we did hear from Jackie, her comment about, seeing how the park, commenting on how the park used to be and used to function. And then great comment about auto shops on Ceylon, letting them know. And Angie, so, we can access the email information for people who registered for this meeting. So I will certainly have that available to contact everybody on this call, if that's so that people don't have to actually enter it directly. I don't know if that's sort of the purpose you were thinking of. Great. Okay. Joao, you have another comment?
Yes, I think I missed out. I put a question when would be the follow-up meeting for this. And then my other question is this. I know it's probably too soon to assess this, but with all being said today, I know you guys probably already have a plan for how the park will be designed. Will any of the things that we said today in this call be used as part of the plan or the modification, or the plans that you guys already have is set to move forward?
So at this point, we haven't started the design process. So it's really been sort of gathering the existing conditions, looking at the history and what's there now. Our goal, of course, would be to reflect the desires of the community. I think in terms of the program, certainly the field is staying as a field, right? So that's not changing dramatically. The play area on Magnolia, we anticipate that's most likely staying as a play area, and the basketball court as well. So I think a lot of those programmatic elements aren't seeing a huge change, but I think it's certainly helpful to, and we'll certainly, look at the comments on some of the other issues. I think there's always a balance on sort of what can be incorporated, given the budget. So I think it's a process of sort of looking at that design cost estimate, and balancing that. And I think that's where, at the next meeting, we'll be able to have something a little bit more developed on what sort of considerations we've made for design and different options, so people can have the chance to comment, and understanding how that fits within the budget, so that we're not sort of over promising something that isn't realistic. But the feedback is certainly taken seriously, and as much as we can incorporate that, we will. So Angie, your question. So the budget, so we do have the construction budget in place, and that's the 3.3 million. And then a allocation of money for the design fees. So does that answer your question? Oh yeah, Angie, I will unmute.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you
Okay,
now.
awesome, awesome, awesome. I think I just want to start off with, I think that the redesign of Ceylon Fields is a great idea. I do want to speak on behalf of the community, and my question behind being the budget has already been assigned to be 3.3 million, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And as of right now, the conversation with engaging the community is around what does the community want that design to look like? I think going back to, I am sorry if I mispronounce the name, Dos Santos. I think the question comes around, with that budget, has there already been conversation around where some funds are going to be allocated when it comes around the design? So I guess the question comes down to, now the community is being engaged. There is an idea behind, we already know that Ceylon Field is going to be redesigned. And now you guys are reaching out to the community to kind of find out what it is that the community wants it to look like and what it's important to the community. I think it goes back to the conversations around what it looked like to come up with the budget of the 3.3 and how much of that has already been allocated to the construction process and things of that sort, and how much of the design is really going to be taken into consideration from the community and the residents, and what has that outreach look like up to now in a gist. And please let me know if you have any questions onto how I asked my question. I am new to this and I'm learning. So this experience is going to be a learning curve for me. So I appreciate being on today's call. So if you can help me understand the process, as well as everyone else on this call, a little bit better on the community engagement component, I think it'd be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, Angie. And thanks for joining us. We're glad that you've participated and connected with us on this meeting. So this is the first meeting for this process. So the initial construction budget amount is something that we do sort of an estimate on what we think the park renovations will cost. But of course, it's it's an estimate. It's sort of taking a guess maybe at what is needed. So that's where that 3.3 million came from. At this point, that other than the field replacement, there's no sort of specific allocation of, how much goes, say, to the playground or to the basketball court. So it'll really be about getting into some detailed or, somewhat more detailed cost estimate to understand, the cost of those things, as we hear sort of back on the community side what the priorities are for the park. I think the one thing that we touched on in the presentation is the legal requirement for us to design some accessible pathways through the park. So that's, can be, I guess, a significant portion of the project. We'll probably, we'll be working with the Disabilities Commission on how we sort of prioritize that, because it can get complicated in how it impacts, the other spaces in the park. So that means that, there's pathways that are either less steep than 5%, or if they're between 5 and 8.33%, they have a handrail and landings and things like that. And as you know, this park has, significant grade change. So it's a little bit complicated. And I think that's something that we're going to need to study, or I should say the design team will look at in more detail. I hope I'm answering your question. I may be going off on a tangent a little bit, but so I guess I think understanding what you're asking is, I guess, other than the field replacement, the construction budget hasn't, oh yeah, I'll unmute you, hasn't been assigned to different areas of the park yet.
I just want to express that I can almost say it's needless to say that not everybody on this project is going to be satisfied at every scope of it, right? I think that as a community member and somebody who is on this call representing the community, it's important to understand even the analysis of accessibility, right? And what that looks like at Ceylon Fields, and what it means for accessibility for the residents and community members that live in that immediate vicinity, right? So I appreciate that you guys are meeting, with the city as far as making sure that ADA regulations and things of that sort are being met. That's great. It's amazing. My senior rock and roll program would definitely benefit from that. I think it's just really important, and I'm sure that you guys are very aware of it for even having this first meeting with the community, that not everybody's going to be satisfied, but to some degree we want to be heard. So we know it's a process. We know it's going to take time, but we just want to emphasize on the outreach and the marketing of what's happening, even for tonight's meeting. What did that look like prior to tonight? And I think that most of the people, if not all of the folks that are on tonight's call, then are not immediate partners in the project. That's our number one concern, and just making sure that it's happening on a realistic level. And what does the outreach look like for you guys in the community, as far as direct outreach and flyering or translation and things of that sort. So I think this is a great meeting. I think we have some good folks on the meeting that can represent some of the surrounding community, but definitely not all. So I think we just want to make sure that that outreach part is happening.
They can't participate.
Yes, thank you, Angie. No, it's great comments. And I think, certainly a goal, and I'll connect with you, I think, after this meeting as well, because we're always open to, other places where we can connect with people, beyond what we're doing. So thank you for that.
And I think one thing that will help Amy is if there's like a timeline on when, could be presented to the community on, and I know everything's not planned, but targeted dates, when we should be expecting a design, when can we expect to have, engagement meetings. And I think that will be helpful for us to kind of get a bird's eye view on the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oh,
And my last question, I promise, is to Amy's point. One of Amy's points is, not everyone is going to be happy with all aspects of, the project. However, if the majority of the community is still not happy with what we come up with, what does that look like? Are we pushing this off until next year? Are we going back to the administration asking for more money to supplement the features that we're asking for?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if it really came to that, where the budget, wasn't enough to do what was necessary to meet the community needs, I think I suppose that would be we would try to ask for more funding. I'm still not 100% certain how that would work, but we can certainly talk about that and try to get an answer back. But I think maybe at the very least, prioritizing sort of, at least doing what people want to see in a prioritized way. So understanding, what is the most important. Is the playground, is that something that warrants, a good portion of the budget, for example, just something like that. I think that's sort of how we would start to look at, look at those improvements and try to figure out what's the greatest need. But we can talk about that, I think, as we get to looking through the cost estimate and understanding that. Let's see, Paulo, are you able to unmute?
Well, others are in meeting, just to answer the question about when the second meeting is. We're targeting late May, but still looking for a specific date. So we'll pass that information along as soon as it's available.
Okay, Paulo, I don't know if you're able to unmute. I see you have your hand up. And if not, Angie has another question. There we go.
Thank you. Technology at its finest, right?
I know.
So just looking over the timeline, it looks like the first meeting is in April, but construction has already been scheduled to start prior to the second meeting of the design. So what I'm hearing and I'm looking at is that this is gonna happen despite of what the community feels, because it's something that community has expressed. Again, I'm new to this, so correct me if I'm wrong. The community has expressed that this is a field that they've wanted to update for a while now. And so the community is getting the update And today's the first meeting for the designing aspect of the project. Construction will ultimately be starting sometime this summer. And then the second design meeting is happening in May. So just for my own clarification, construction is happening either way. And we are at the point where community members can say what their ideas are as part of the design of the park. Am I hearing this? Am I reading this correctly? Please correct me if I'm wrong.
So the construction that is targeted for this summer is for the turf replacement. That's something that we know is necessary, and it's in demand for, a number of current activities that are going on. So that's sort of the more, I think, urgent component, whereas the remainder of the park is where we're focusing sort of the discussion and the community input. But you're right, that sort of has an overlap with some of the engagement for the remainder of the park.
Amy, would it be helpful to flip to a plan to just point out what we mean specifically when we say the turf versus the rest of the park?
Yeah, that'd be great, Kara.
I'm pulling that slide up now. Thank you.
And maybe also to clarify where the edge of the turf replacement is. Does it include any of the bleachers at the side?
So the area is essentially what's noted as the turf multi-purpose field here. With that does include the locations where there are the bleachers and benches and the mister at the top of the field on this plan. So essentially anything outside of the boundary of this turf field would be part of the second phase. First phase is just the field.
Jared, I was just going to jump in. So there was some discussion today on seating around the field. And so during the field construction this summer, it's just the field. And so any seating would be addressed during the park design. So after this happens, so it's really strictly just the field. So the existing limits, if you were to go out to the field today and you see the existing limits of the field, that's what's being replaced this summer. So nothing's being changed. There's been some discussions on fencing and everything, and I think all that will be addressed during the upcoming design meetings, the one at the end of May and then the one this summer. And as we further look at programming the park, I think all that stuff will be addressed in terms of kind of how that plays out. And so we may look at replacing some of the bench, like the actual team bench this summer, but as far as seating and all that would be addressed during the design of the park.
Thanks, Trey.
Trey, can you also comment? So Mike was asking about the size of the field.
Yeah. So the soccer field itself is if you're looking for size of the field itself, the soccer field itself is 165 feet wide by 350 feet long. That's the field, the dimensions of the field. And then there's lacrosse, which is 160 by 330. And then the field overall it's about 80,000 square feet of turf. So there's a little bit room, obviously, there's a little bit room on, both ends, and there's not a lot of room on the side. So we're not changing the size of the field. It's just kind of going back in place.
And Angie, I see your question. So replacing the turf, that's correct, that it will then be, usable while the rest of the park is under construction. And just knowing that the condition that it's in now is, is quite poor. It's become, a very hard surface. So that's also not good. So it's something that I think, is urgently needed as a replacement. And it will also allow, part of the park to be usable while a portion of the park is under construction.
There's a note from Michael about construction vehicles on the field after replacing the turf field. We've had some discussions about that, and there are construction methods where we can, the contractors would work through these issues. But if we needed to be working directly adjacent to the field to make any improvements directly adjacent to the field, there are means to protect the field that are possible in terms of laying down boards that would protect the turf. That's a good point and a good thing to consider.
Okay, well, if that's, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I can't thank you enough for, coming out to this meeting and for all the thoughtful comments. I think if anyone else, I think looks like we're good on questions, but certainly feel free to email me. I'll put my email one more time in the chat. And I'll reach out to you all from the list of the meeting registrants. So then we can certainly be in touch, and we welcome any other groups or constituents that we should connect with. Any input on that is certainly appreciated. And we will keep you posted on the next steps, and we'll plan to be in touch. So just want to say thank you again. And we hope to talk again soon.